You build an aggressive lineup, but you somehow drop the ball in the first 15 minutes, and the enemy team has an advantage. What's the better play here? Do you just go ahead and give up a lot of your map control and wait out your opportunity, or do you try and force the fights anyway?
I think she's going to go on Jerax right now, who has a TP, but he doesn't have enough mana to use this, and he was trying to drag the creeps over, but FNG going to get another solo kill as he's on a Mega Spree, but I think what you do if you're MVP Hot 6 is wait out the items that you absolutely need to fight. Like, if Hot 6 can grab a few items on their course, like if Forev gets a BKB for the next fight, and if you get a Bloodstone on the Lina, then maybe you can get into an engagement. Like, those are probably the items that you wait for.
Oh, MP. Telekinesis up and taken out. I'm not sure what his plan there, if he was just hoping to be able to push out the wave real quick, but this build is also perhaps a bit questionable for the Lina as well, going for the Soul Booster, Bloodstone, rather than the Eul's Scepter, which would have given him maybe a lot more solo killing power.
Yeah, but I don't think he wanted to play the solo killing style. I think they were trying to get into team fights early, but especially when that mid-fight collapsed where they lost so many heroes, and then especially with that Roshan, things kind of just went the other way, and MVP Hot 6, they don't really have the best lineup at coming back into this game because their comeback mechanic doesn't really exist. You've got a Midas on Forev, but the rest of their heroes aren't designed to be behind. Like, Lion is a pretty greedy support. Pugna is definitely a greedy support. Like, you need that hero to have some measure of items to be able to do anything, because as we saw, when he walks forward to Nether Blast, he gets fissured once and then dies.
Yeah, especially when they try and do the Blood Rage Pugna.
Yeah,
we saw that a couple of times where they wanted to get
down.
the extra damage for Nether Blast on towers. That's just so risky, as Virtus.pro have more than enough initiation and long-range nukes to be able to bring down that Pugna if necessary. BKB is coming up soon for our Templar Assassin. It's got the Desolator, Blink Dagger, and of course that Aegis of Mortal that we saw earlier. Hasn't died a single time yet.
I think what you're waiting right now for is MP to finish that Bloodstone, and you've got one smoke if you're MVP, and that's pretty much your one real way back into the game. So you might see them just get the Bloodstone and then decide to go for some sort of counterplay, because you can't just let VP take complete map control at this point. Like, once you get those items on MVP Hot 6, what are you really waiting for? Like, it's going to take you way too long to get an Aghanim Scepter on Lina. Like,
right.
The game probably ends before that if you let it progress at this rate. So you have to choose at some point to get aggressive on the map.
Oh, Forev. Echo slammed immediately. They're willing to pop that ultimate just to finish off the Bloodseeker, especially when they're already pushing in both top and middle lane. Now, the Earthshaker's going to go back to defend. He already used his Echo Slam anyway, so he'll try and stop the TP back of Lina, or at least protect that Tier 3 tower. Meanwhile, his allies putting pressure on the Tier 3 at top lane. Sunby already jumping onto Illidan, who pops his BKB, and now turns and fights Sunby. Sunby will go down quite easily. Jerax already slowed down. Snowball will pull the Gyrocopter forward in order to get that kill. He trying to heal up his allies and kill the enemy with a single target focus is just not going to be good enough. Bloodseekers comes back, and looks like they'll be able to take out the Templar Assassin's Aegis, but that seems to be about it. Forev can't even force this fight anymore. A 10-second BKB just did nothing for them. And Virtus.pro will back up. Pretty happy with that fight.
Yeah, they're going to be incredibly satisfied with how that went, because they were able to just dive. There was no repercussions. You even forced I think that was a buyback on the Lion and the Bloodseeker, and he uses 10-second BKB. Like, of all the things that could have gone wrong there, they went wrong there. Because that's what your comeback mechanic is. That 10-second BKB, getting the Bloodstone on MP, that's your best shot. So I think MVP, honestly, you just get the Bloodstone on Lina and go. Like, wait for the BKB to refresh back up on MP. Because if you just sit back and passively wait for the game to end, you're going to give up the Roshan onto VP, and there's not a lot of locations that you want to get into a fight with. You better just go for pickoffs. I think it's the best possible option, but even then they don't have the best way to open up because they don't have a Blink Dagger on their Lion.
Yeah, they're pretty much completely reliant on the clockwork to be able to set up those single target picks.
This is a YOLO smoke if I've ever seen one. The complexity wraparound. The old Cole TI2, remember that? If you're behind, just go for the wraparound.
Mm-hmm. Jerax is desperately trying to push out that bottom lane in order to get that Blink Dagger that we previously mentioned. Virtus.pro just not quite feeling comfortable enough to go for a push. And why should they? I mean, they've got this game pretty much in the bag. They just have to play patiently and maybe wait out the next Roshan and then go uphill with the next Aegis.
Yeah, I think that's actually what MVP are waiting for. The next Roshan to respawn and then hopefully catch them into that angle.
Right.
Because I guess there's no better objective to go for. Like, you're not going to smoke gank and get a tier 2 out of anything. The mid tower is way too healthy. Same thing with the top tower. And getting kills right now isn't enough. So you probably wait for that. I still think they maybe should just smoke right now and try to go for something before the Roche fight. Because I feel like the Roche fight is just way too obvious.
Lil almost found a pick off on that Lion at bottom lane, but a Hex TP out does get him away. Heen. Then G is going to commit the Echo Slam. He immediately gets ruptured and force snaps himself away. TP's out. He's good. The call down also zoning away a lot of MVP Hot 6. In fact, it's going to get a kill on Sunby. Now they're going to pursue for more. Illidan is trying to just right-click these heroes down, and with the trap, he will be able to catch up to NP. Gets that kill. And Jarek's, well, healed up by the Bloodstone, will start backing himself up. Turns to go for God, hexing him away, but now there goes the Ice Shards to try and block him back to his retreat to the Fountain. God moves forward right in front of the Fountain, gets the kill. Lion was running up those fatal steps, but it wasn't good enough, and sure enough, MVP Hot 6 call it. GG, 24 minutes, 26-5, Virtus Pro, a very dominant victory by them.
They just completely outplayed them from start to finish. MVP Hot 6's lineup, when you originally look at it, that's so unforgiving. You can't mess up. With supports like Lion and Pugna both, those are heroes that are going to naturally just have cap out at around 800 HP. Even if you decide to do the Sing Sing Vibe Bracer kind of thing, and Lil sells everything and he buys 5-6 mangoes, but the thing is, he decided to build incredibly defensive while FNG was allowed to go for the Blink Dagger, and it just made such a big difference. As you mess up 1 or 2 fights with MVP's lineup, you just lose the game.
So VP taking game number 1, sitting themselves in an even better position for the standings. Of course, we're going to take a break, as the analysts, I'm sure, have a lot to talk about this 24-minute match.
All right, G giving a nice little wave to the camera, feeling good after that win. A fairly quick one, of course, and fairly single-handedly defeating MVP Hot 6. What do you have to say about that, Synderen?
I hope you guys don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, well, we can say something about Rubik's skill build, because I think the statsmans are going to be very happy with him, gathering all the stats of what people play on their heroes, and then Lil has this thing at the end of the game. This time it was all mangoes.
He had 6 mangoes?
6 mangoes.
But the Lina on the opposing team had 5 mangoes and a bottle.
Oh,
that's true.
There were so many. He actually balanced it out, so the win rate of mango didn't really increase.
This is true.
It's kind of useless.
This is actually very considerate.
Well, I don't know. For me, a pretty one-dimensional game. We said it in the draft. They have to play super well early. Their lineup falls off very quickly if they don't start winning fights and taking towers in the first 15 minutes. It's going to be very, very difficult. VP won the early game. VP won the game.
That is
it's really one of those games, in my opinion.
That is basically all that happened. We talked about this at the start of the game. If Hot 6 was going to win, then they're going to do it at the start of the game. And they didn't. And they actually got rolled over pretty hard at that point. So I'm thinking that, at that point, they just drafted themselves into a corner. We said that at the start of the game. And that corner, they could have done well with that corner if they actually were able to build off of that. But they just didn't get their feet off the ground. And then it just was fairly one-sided and not very exciting in the end.
All right. Well, we do have a replay here ready for us. I mean, we can find a couple, I'm sure, in that game, mostly in favor of VP. And as we take a look, so Hot 6, and this has kind of been the theme for a lot of teams, as we've discussed earlier, is just these teams, they focus maybe too much on the fights, and all right, we're going to focus on the kills. Sure, they rounded it out with the Pugna this time around, but it didn't really work out too well for them. Just, it's this, we always say, all right, maybe it's not, the drafts are all right. That's been the theme we've had so far. But in Hot 6's case, do they need to change the draft a little bit? Because we've seen this repeated.
Yeah, it's a very similar situation with the EG. They come up with this last pick, which has to be a spellcaster for their solo mid player, which in a sense doesn't really, it's so difficult when you have to play around like this player can only, I'm not sure if they only want to put him on spellcasting mid heroes or he just plays spellcasting. It's a huge hindrance towards the drafter, I feel. A lot of limitations, and it's just basically most of the time you try to avoid stuff like this in a team. You don't want limitations on, I can only play this hero, or I only want to play this sort of hero. It's generally a negative thing for a team.
Yeah, well, we have the final moments of that game too, as we see VP pushing in and just taking the game for themselves against MVP Hot 6. Synderen, do you think, so we just talked about the draft and whatnot, Hot 6, do you think they'll just end up trying a similar strategy again and just trying to gain confidence through that and say, hey, well, this is what we do. If we can win with this, we'll gain confidence? That was one of the most meaningful sides that I've heard.
Okay, let me put that. I would not recommend trying this again.
Right.
At least, if you want to do some, I would consider this an all-out early game strat, which we very rarely see. If we see all-out early game strats, they're usually revolving around pushing towers super early. Like you have multiple heroes with summons, and you have like Apugna, which they have, but that was the only pusher they had, so you can destroy the game early. Like in terms of ease of execution, this is perhaps the hardest way to play Dota. Like you have to gank really well early on. They can't fail. The enemy team can't get much farm. And on top of that, you also have a clock. Because if they get BKBs, even if you're ahead, they can actually beat your team at a 10k deficit in their own base. So personally for me, this is the weakest draft Hot 6 has had all tournament. And I am worried for them that they are just tilting right now. And that they don't know what to do. Which is really unfortunate because they have so many good elements from the last days. To me, this was not the adaptation they were looking for. Quite the contrary, actually. They took this in the wrong direction, and maybe they just, I don't know. It could be a one-off game for them where they started drafting the idea they had, they started doubting themselves and just went with something completely different. But to me, this is definitely not the way to go.
All right. Shiva, any thoughts for you?
I think, for Virtus Pro, they just got free reign. They could do whatever they wanted to. And maybe Hot 6, maybe I was wrong, maybe they should try to put Virtus Pro a bit out of their comfort zone, even though that's very difficult to do. But if they can't play their own game to their own strengths, and if they can't, get their own lineup to work, which I think this was kind of it that they were expecting to work, then they have to try something else. We're at TI, they can't just let themselves get rolled over like that again. That's not an option.
Yeah. All right. Well, speaking of MVP, of course, Hot 6 not so successful this game, but the other MVP team, MVP Phoenix. We have a quick update on that. I'm sure most of you have heard by now. They did win their first game against IG, and with some spectacular fashion too. So we'll take a look at that.
The manliest of items.
The triple rapier game?
Yeah.
Yes.
Game.
Spoilers.
Oh man.
So, as Empire, you go late game against an Ember and a Gyrocopter.
It's just, I'm really nervous really worried rather for IG at this point. Okay. That is the appropriate reaction to that slide of face. But you got to be worried for IG. We were skeptical in the start. They had some good plays, some bad plays on day one. Yesterday, they also didn't really show up. They've got the draw against LGD, which is clearly their best result on paper, and they're now down 1-0 against MVP, who most people believe to be maybe the weakest team of the group. And I'm nervous for IG as to whether they can get their play together again. They most likely have to accept being in the lower bracket at this point. Mm-hmm. Going into the main event, they need to win a best of one in the start. We could see IG in the bottom 4, technically, if they don't get out of this slump, which would be, it's almost impossible to imagine going into the tournament that, maybe IG don't play super high, but bottom 4?
Yeah, Winter, what do you take away from this? IG, what's going on here? Simply put.
Yeah, even on the first day, we were talking about, when we were discussing about IG, we weren't really sure what would happen to IG. Will they do well, or will they just crumble? Because they have been showing a lot of mixed results and hasn't particularly performed well in the recent patch as well. So they have a few days to change up, take a look at the replays and the closer angle and try to figure out whether it's mostly the draft or execution or what heroes they should prioritize more based on the stats of their team. There's a lot of work they